It was a quiet night on Earth, the kind of night where everything felt still, as if the world was holding its breath. The stars above seemed distant, almost unreachable, as if the universe itself was waiting for something. No one knew that the peace they thought was theirs was about to shatter. For years, humans had lived with the belief that they were the center of the universe. The most intelligent, the most powerful, nothing could threaten them. But as the days passed, strange things started to happen. First, it was a few unexplainable signals picked up by satellite stations. Then strange lights in the sky, so brief, so fleeting that they could be dismissed as nothing more than a glitch or a comet. But they weren't. Then, one evening, the skies over several major cities across the globe turned an unnatural shade of red. People stared in awe, some terrified, while others were curious, thinking it was some kind of cosmic event. But this was no natural occurrence. No one knew at the time, but the world was about to change forever. The first attack came without warning. Cities were devastated as massive alien ships descended from the sky. They were not the gentle visitors humans had hoped for, but rather cold, calculating invaders, bent on wiping out everything they could. With speed and precision, they struck without hesitation. Buildings crumbled, fires spread, and the air filled with the sounds of sirens and panic. People ran through the streets in chaos, trying to escape the unrelenting forces above. Humans had no time to prepare. They had never expected anything like this. Governments scrambled to respond, but it was clear from the very first attack. They were outmatched. The aliens were faster, stronger, and more advanced in ways that humans couldn't even comprehend. In the midst of the destruction, one soldier stood out among the rest. Her name was Sarah, and like many others, she had never believed that Earth was anything more than an isolated speck in the vastness of the universe. The idea that something out there might want to destroy them seemed absurd. But now, with the world in flames and the sky filled with alien ships, she knew the truth. Humanity was no longer alone, and they were not the dominant force they thought they were. Sarah had always been prepared for the worst, but even she wasn't ready for this. She had been trained for combat, for survival, but facing an alien invasion was something entirely different. Yet, she felt a fire in her gut that she hadn't known existed. A burning desire to protect her home. As the sun began to rise over the ruins of what had once been a bustling city, Sarah picked up her weapon and took her first step into the unknown. She wasn't alone. Around her, soldiers from all over the world were gearing up for battle, preparing for a fight that no one had ever expected. The war had begun, but it was not just a war of survival. It was a war that would change everything. A war that would reveal to humanity just how fragile their existence was, how little they truly understood about the universe. And in the midst of all this chaos, the most unexpected truth was about to come to light. Humanity had always been a myth. To most of the galaxy, Earth and its people were nothing more than stories tales whispered among alien civilizations, lost in time. Now those myths were coming to life. And they weren't here to save humanity. They were here to destroy it. Sarah's heart raced as she looked at the sky, knowing the battle was far from over. But one thing was certain: humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. The world had not yet fully grasped the scale of the disaster. While military forces around the globe tried to regroup and fight back, it became clear that their weapons and technology were no match for the alien forces. It wasn't just their advanced technology that set them apart. There was something deeper, something almost otherworldly about these invaders. Sarah and her team were stationed in a small, battered base near the outskirts of what used to be a thriving metropolis. They had seen countless civilians flee, watched as their homes were reduced to rubble, and heard the constant rumble of explosions in the distance. It was as if the Earth itself was under siege, with no safe place left to run. In the early days of the invasion, the military tried to organize a counteroffensive. Fighter jets flew into the sky, missile strikes were launched, but the alien ships seemed to have an impenetrable shield. Nothing could penetrate their defenses. It was as if they were invincible, and humanity's hopes of survival grew thinner with each passing hour. Sarah sat in the command center, eyes glued to the screen, watching as more and more cities fell. The map of the world had become a horrifying display of red markers. The more she watched, the more the sense of dread settled deep into her bones. It was one thing to hear about aliens from sci-fi movies, but facing them in real life was a whole different story. The truth was undeniable. Now humanity wasn't the apex species of the universe. "Captain," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Turner, one of her closest allies. "We've received word from the front lines. They've spotted something." New? Sarah's voice was calm, but inside she was on edge. What more could there possibly be? Turner nodded, his expression grim. "It's not just the ships anymore. They're sending something down, soldiers. Something ... different." The news sent a chill down Sarah's spine. They had been expecting the ships to drop more of their deadly technology, but this was something more personal. Something far more dangerous. Within hours, they received orders to deploy. A team of soldiers, including Sarah, was sent to the outskirts of the city where the first sightings of the alien troops had been reported. They were to recon the area and gather intelligence. As Sarah and her team navigated through the desolate landscape, the silence felt unnatural. The streets were empty, the buildings crumbled, and the air carried the faint smell of burning metal. The usual sounds of life, cars, voices, the hum of activity were replaced by an eerie quiet. Then the ground trembled. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her weapon. She looked at Turner. "Did you feel that?" "Yeah," he replied, his eyes scanning the area. "Something's coming." Suddenly, the trees at the edge of the ruins shook. A low, menacing growl echoed through the air. The ground cracked open as figures began to emerge from beneath the earth. They were taller than any human, and their sleek, black armor glinted in the dim light of the setting sun. Their features were strange, almost insect-like, with elongated limbs and sharp, menacing claws. Their heads were large, smooth, and bald, with eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Sarah and her team raised their weapons. But there was something about these creatures that made her hesitate for just a moment. It wasn't just their appearance, it was their movement. They were fast, almost too fast, and their coordination was flawless. They moved in unison, as though they were one being, a hive of alien intelligence. One of the creatures stepped forward, its eyes locked on Sarah. It tilted its head, studying her with an unsettling, almost calculating gaze. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she held her ground. She wasn't going to back down now. She COULDN single quotes T. Then, without warning, the alien lunged. The soldiers opened fire, but the creature was too quick. It darted between them with terrifying agility, its claws swiping through the air like blades. In the blink of an eye, one of Sarah's team members was gone, dragged away into the shadows, leaving only a blood-curdling scream in his wake. Sarah's mind raced. They were outmatched. There was no way they could win this fight. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to keep their very existence intact. "Fall back!" Sarah shouted, but it was too late. The aliens were everywhere, moving faster than she could comprehend. They were no longer just invaders from another world. They were predators, and humanity was the prey. As Sarah turned to retreat, she realized with horror that the creatures weren't just attacking. They were hunting, and they weren't stopping. The retreat was chaotic. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she ran through the crumbling streets, her legs burning with every step. The sounds of her team's frantic footsteps and the distant cries of soldiers echoed in her ears. Behind her, The alien creatures were gaining ground, moving with deadly speed and precision. They didn't need to chase. They were toying with them. As Sarah reached a collapsed building, she ducked behind a pile of rubble, gasping for breath. The rest of her team had scattered, each trying to find cover, but it was clear they were out of their depth. The aliens were everywhere. It wasn't just their strength or speed. They moved like shadows, blending into the environment, striking when least expected. It was a nightmare made real. Lieutenant Turner found her first, his face pale, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Sarah, we're not going to make it out of here. We need to get back to the base, regroup, and warn command." "If we don't—" "I know," Sarah interrupted, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "We need to stay alive. No one can know what we saw here today. Not yet." They both knew what she meant. The world didn't know the full extent of the invasion. The military was still under the illusion that these aliens were just invaders, violent, brutal creatures. But after seeing them in action, Sarah realized something more disturbing. These aliens weren't just attacking humanity. They were hunting them. They were picking them off one by one, testing their strength, learning how to break them. As Sarah and Turner made their way through the ruined city, trying to avoid detection, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the aliens were not only hunting them, they were planning something far worse. The way they worked together, as if they shared one mind, was too coordinated to be a simple attack. They were strategizing. When they finally reached a makeshift command center, Sarah was met with grim faces. Soldiers, engineers, and civilians alike were huddled in the dimly lit room, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. The walls were covered in maps, charts, and satellite images, showing the alien ship still hovering over major cities. "Report," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm, though inside, she was struggling to maintain control. One of the officers, a man named Colonel Harris, turned to her. "We've got a serious problem. The aliens aren't just targeting us, they're targeting our most strategic locations. Military bases, communication centers, energy grids. They've been taking down our satellites and cutting off all communications." Sarah felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. They were systematically dismantling humanity's ability to fight back. "We need to know why," Sarah said quietly. "We need to understand what they want," Harris nodded slowly. "We think it's more than just conquest. Our analysts believe they're here for something specific. Something on Earth." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Sarah's mind raced. What could the aliens possibly want here on Earth? Were they looking for resources? Or was it something more? That's when Turner spoke up, his voice low. "What if it's us? What if humanity itself is the reason they came?" Everyone in the room fell silent. The suggestion was absurd, but the more Sarah thought about it, the more it started to make sense. The aliens didn't just see them as a threat. They were treating humanity as a prey species. They were hunting them for a reason. Suddenly, the door to the command center burst open. Another soldier, breathless and wide-eyed, rushed in, holding a piece of data on a screen. "You need to see this," he said urgently. The image on the screen showed a series of ancient symbols, markings that seemed to match the same strange symbols found on the aliens' ships. The markings weren't just random, they were a language, one that was centuries old. And the strange part? The language was similar to ancient human myths. Sarah's eyes widened. Could it be possible? "Are you telling me the aliens know about us?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "They don't just know about us," the soldier said, shaking his head. "They've known about us for millennia, the myth of humanity. It wasn't a myth at all. The truth is far worse than we thought." The screen flickered, revealing an image that left everyone in the room in stunned silence. It was an ancient star map 1 that aligned perfectly with Earth's position in the galaxy, but it showed something more, a path, a trail leading back. To the aliens. A path that had been abandoned long ago. A path that, according to the map, was now being followed once more. "They've been here before," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "And they've come back to finish what they started." The truth hit her like a wave. This wasn't just an invasion, it was a reckoning. The aliens weren't just interested in Earth for its resources. They were here to erase the myth of humanity once and for all. They had known about Earth long before humanity had ever known about them. And now, they were coming for what was theirs. Asterisk. The truth was like a heavy weight pressing down on Sarah's chest. The revelation that the aliens had known about Earth, long before humanity ever knew about them, was a terrifying one. But there was something even more unsettling than that something in the map they had found. Something that made Sarah's blood run cold. The aliens weren't just coming for the Earth. They were coming for something that had been here long before humanity had even risen from the primordial soup. It was as if the Earth itself was tied to something far older, something much more significant than just a simple planet in the universe. The alien forces hadn't invaded on a whim. They had been waiting for the right moment. Sarah sat at the command center, staring at the ancient star map that was still flickering on the screen in front of her. Her mind was racing. If the aliens had known about Earth for centuries, what was it that they wanted? What had been hidden here, buried deep in the past, that was so important? "We need answers," Sarah muttered to herself. "We need to find out what's hidden," Colonel Harris said, standing beside her. "Before it's too late." The air in the command center felt thick, the silence oppressive. Soldiers and officers moved quietly around them, analyzing data, scanning satellite images, and making plans. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through their fingers. Every time they learned a piece of the puzzle, it only led to more questions. The map was clear. The aliens were following a trail that had been left for them, an ancient path that led directly to Earth. But why now? Why after all this time? Lieutenant Turner, who had been deep in thought for the past few moments, suddenly spoke up. "What if the path isn't just about finding Earth? What if it's about finding us?" Sarah looked at him, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean? The myths, the stories we grew up with," Turner continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if they weren't just stories? What if humanity was always meant to be a part of something bigger, something connected to these aliens?" Sarah's stomach twisted. She had heard the stories. The old legends passed down through generations. Stories of gods, of beings from the stars, of people who were destined for something greater. But they had always been just that, stories. Myths, nothing more. "Are you saying we're part of something they've been waiting for?" Sarah asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. Turner didn't respond right away, his eyes distant as he seemed to consider the implications. Then he nodded. "What if humans were never meant to be the dominant species of Earth? What if we were just placed here? Part of some bigger plan?" The room was silent. No one dared to speak. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. "We've been a myth all along," Sarah said softly. "But the myth isn't about us being special. The myth is about us being something else, a tool, a key, or a piece of something greater." Sarah stood up, her legs shaky, and walked over to the wall where the star map was pinned. Her eyes traced the lines that seemed to connect Earth to distant stars, to far-off worlds where the aliens came from. And as she studied the map, a chilling realization swept over her. The aliens weren't here to conquer Earth. They were here to take back what had been left behind. And whatever it was, humanity was at the center of it all. "We have to stop them," Sarah said, her voice hardening with determination. "We don't even know what we're up against." Colonel Harris replied, his tone cautious. "How do you plan to stop something that's been waiting for centuries?" "We fight back," Sarah said firmly. "Whatever this is, whatever they want from us, we can't let them have it. We don't know the full story yet, But I know one thing for sure. We're not going to be their pawns. We're not going to let them erase us from history." She turned to the officers and soldiers around her. "Gather everything we know about the aliens. We need to figure out how to fight them, how to protect Earth, and most importantly, how to stop them from taking whatever it is they came for." The room came to life as the soldiers and officers began to work with renewed urgency. But Sarah knew that the task ahead of them was monumental. They had no idea what the aliens were after, or what secrets the Earth held. All they knew was that they had to act fast before it was too late. As Sarah looked out over the ruins of the city from the command center, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They were fighting for more than just survival now. They were fighting for their place in the universe. They were fighting to uncover the mysteries of the past and to stop the aliens from erasing humanity from existence. And with every passing minute, the enemy was drawing closer. The clock was ticking. The days that followed were a blur of frantic activity. As the alien forces continued to descend upon Earth with relentless precision, Sarah and her team dug deeper into the ancient maps and symbols, trying to piece together the mystery behind the invasion. The more they uncovered, the more they realized just how little they truly knew about the world around them. The star maps were far more complex than they had initially thought. They weren't just charts of distant galaxies. They were intricate, almost like a guide. They showed not only the locations of alien worlds, but also specific points of interest on Earth, places that were believed to be lost to history, buried beneath the surface for centuries. One such place was located deep within the Amazon rainforest, a site marked on the map as the Nexus. According to the ancient symbols, this was the key location that the aliens had been searching for. It wasn't just a place, it was something more. A structure of immense power that had been hidden for millennia, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. "Why here?" Sarah murmured to herself as she stared at the map. "Why now?" "We don't have much time," Turner said, snapping her out of her thoughts. His voice was filled with urgency. "If the aliens are after this Nexus, we need to find it first. They'll stop at nothing to get to it. And if we don't figure out how to defend it, we might as well say goodbye to Earth." The realization hit Sarah like a slap in the face. The alien forces weren't just after Earth's resources, they were after something hidden beneath it. Something that had been there long before humanity had ever walked the Earth. Something powerful. They had no choice but to act. There was no other option. The world's military forces were already spread thin, and the alien invaders seemed to be outwitting them at every turn. If they were going to stop this invasion, they had to go to the heart of the mystery. "I'll lead the mission," Sarah said, her voice steely with determination. "We'll gather a team and head to the Nexus. It's the only chance we have left." With little time to waste, Sarah and her team were quickly assembled. Soldiers, engineers, and scientists all came together, each with their own skills and expertise, ready to face whatever awaited them in the heart of the Amazon. It wasn't just a search for a location, it was a race against time to uncover the ancient secrets that had been buried for centuries. The journey to the Amazon was long and perilous. As their helicopter flew through the dense jungle, Sarah looked out at the green expanse below. The jungle seemed alive with mystery, its towering trees hiding secrets that no one had ever dared to explore. The thick canopy above blocked out the sun, casting the world below into an eternal twilight. When they arrived at the coordinates, they found a massive ancient structure hidden beneath the overgrown foliage. It was a pyramid-like structure, its stone surface covered in strange, glowing symbols that matched those they had seen on the alien star maps. "Is this it?" Turner asked, awe in his voice. "It has to be," Sarah replied. "The Nexus." As they approached the structure, they were careful to avoid any traps or alarms that might have been set long ago. The air around them was thick with the feeling of something ancient, something powerful. Every step they took seemed to echo in the silence, a reminder that they were walking through the remnants of a forgotten world. They entered the structure, their flashlights illuminating the dark passageways. Ahead, the walls were covered in more symbols, some glowing faintly, others faded from age. But there was one thing that stood out: the center of the pyramid. At its heart, there was a massive chamber, and within it, a strange pulsating light that seemed to call out to them. "Look at this," one of the scientists whispered, his voice trembling. "It's like nothing I've ever seen." Sarah stepped forward, her heart racing. In the center of the chamber, there was a stone pedestal, and atop it sat an artifact unlike anything she had ever imagined. It was a sphere, glowing with an otherworldly light, its surface etched with more of the ancient symbols. The air around it hummed with energy, and Sarah could feel its pull deep within her chest. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is what they've been searching for." But before anyone could react, a sound like thunder echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath them shook, and the walls trembled. The alien invaders had arrived. They had found them, Sarah's team scrambled to take cover as the ceiling above them began to crack. Massive alien war machines had descended from the sky, their weapons trained on the Nexus. The battle for Earth wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about the fate of everything. "We have to protect it," Sarah shouted. "This artifact can't fall into their hands." As the aliens stormed the pyramid, Sarah and her team fought back with everything they had. Gunfire echoed through the chamber, and the light from the artifact flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The aliens were relentless, their advanced weapons cutting through the soldiers like they were nothing. In the chaos, Sarah saw one of the alien soldiers move toward the artifact, its glowing eyes locked onto the sphere. "No!" she screamed, rushing forward. But it was too late. The alien's hand reached out, and as it touched the artifact, the room erupted in blinding light. The blinding light from the artifact seemed to stretch out across the chamber, a wave of energy that pushed everything away. Sarah felt her body being thrown backward, as if some invisible force was dragging her, pulling her toward the center of the room. She hit the ground hard, her vision spinning as the world around her exploded in chaos. When the light faded, the pyramid was eerily silent. Sarah pushed herself up from the floor, her head throbbing with the remnants of the energy surge. Around her, her team was scattered, groaning in pain but slowly picking themselves up. The aliens, too, seemed momentarily stunned, disoriented by the strange pulse of power that had erupted from the artifact. "What just happened?" Turner asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know, but we need to move," Sarah replied, forcing herself to her feet. The pyramid had become a battlefield, with the alien forces regrouping and preparing for another assault. The artifact was still glowing faintly in the center of the room, but its energy was now pulsing in a strange, erratic rhythm. It was almost as if the artifact was alive. One of the scientists, Dr. Mitchell, stepped forward cautiously. I think it activated something. A signal, maybe. It's like it's calling out to something." "Calling out to what?" Sarah asked, her eyes narrowing. Dr. Mitchell looked at the glowing artifact, his expression a mix of awe and fear. "I'm not sure, but the pattern of energy, it matches some of the readings we've been picking up from the alien ships. It's almost as if they were waiting for this moment." Before Sarah could respond, the floor beneath them shook violently. The sound of alien war machines was unmistakable, their heavy footfalls growing louder as they moved closer. "We need to hold them off long enough to figure out what this artifact is," Sarah shouted, rallying her team. "It's our only chance." They scrambled into position, setting up makeshift defenses around the chamber. The alien soldiers, recovering from the blast, had regrouped and were now charging toward them with renewed fury. The battle for control of the Nexus was far from over. Sarah took a deep breath and tightened her grip on her weapon. The artifact, this mysterious object, was somehow the key to everything. The aliens wanted it, and that meant humanity needed to protect it at all costs. If they lost the artifact now, there might be no future for Earth. Gunfire erupted around her as her team clashed with the alien forces. The pyramid's interior was now a war zone, walls cracked, beams of light from the alien weapons slicing through the darkness, and the heavy hum of alien ships above them growing louder with each passing second. But Sarah couldn't focus on the battle. Her eyes kept flicking back to the artifact. Something was happening to it. The energy emanating from it was becoming stronger, more intense. And as she stared at it, a sudden realization hit her. The artifact wasn't just a beacon. It was a weapon. She wasn't sure how she knew it, but the strange connection she felt to the artifact made her instinctively reach out. She took a tentative step toward it, feeling the pull deep within her. As her fingers brushed against the surface, the entire room seemed to hum, resonating with a power far beyond anything she had ever experienced. For a moment, everything else faded away, the sounds of gunfire, the screams of her teammates, the roars of the alien creatures. It was just her and the artifact. And then, the unimaginable happened. The artifact's light flared to life, brighter than ever before. The power it released was overwhelming, and Sarah felt herself enveloped in it. It wasn't just energy, it was consciousness. A voice, not in her ears, but in her mind. A deep, ancient voice, speaking in a language that was both alien and familiar. "You are the last." The words echoed through Sarah's thoughts, sending a chill down her spine. She staggered back, trying to make sense of what had just happened. What was this? What did it mean? The voice came again, but this time it was clearer. "You are the progeny of those who once ruled." Sarah's eyes widened. What did that mean? Was this some kind of message from an ancient race? Were they the ancestors of humanity? Before she could ponder any further, a violent tremor shook the chamber. The alien forces, now fully aware of the artifact's power, began their final charge. But this time, something was different. The artifact was no longer just an object of power, it had become a conduit. Its energy was rippling through the chamber, and Sarah could feel it coursing through her, feeding her strength. The alien seemed to pause, as if sensing the change. But it was too late. With a roar, the artifact's energy exploded outward in a shockwave, knocking the alien soldiers back. The force was immense, and the walls of the pyramid trembled as if the very structure was coming alive. The alien ships above them began to flicker and spark, their engines sputtering as the wave of energy disabled their systems. Sarah could barely stand as the wave of power surged through her, but she managed to steady herself and look around. Her team was still alive, though battered. The aliens, too, were regrouping, but they were no longer as coordinated as they had been. "They're weakening," Turner said, his voice filled with disbelief. "We have to finish this," Sarah said, her voice resolute. She turned to Dr. Mitchell, who was still staring at the artifact, wide-eyed. "Do you know how to control it?" The scientist shook his head. "It's unlike anything I've ever seen, but I think we can use it. If we can tap into the right frequency, we might be able to turn the tide." As the aliens prepared for another assault, Sarah's team made one final push. They fought with everything they had, but now they had a weapon that could change the course of the war. The artifact was no longer just an ancient mystery, it was humanity's last hope. The battle in the heart of the ancient pyramid raged on. The shockwave from the artifact had given Sarah and her team a brief reprieve, but the alien forces were regrouping. It was clear that the invaders weren't just fighting to conquer, they were fighting to reclaim something that had been lost. To them for millennia. Sarah stood with her team, sweat beading on her forehead as she looked at the artifact. It was no longer just a glowing sphere, it was something far more powerful. It pulsed with energy, as though it had awakened from a long, deep sleep, ready to unleash its full potential. The ground beneath them seemed to hum, resonating with the power that surged from the artifact. "We have to use it," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "It's the only way to stop them." But Dr. Mitchell's expression was grim. "We still don't know how to fully control it. If we tamper with it the wrong way, we don't have time for hesitation," Sarah cut him off. "The aliens are on their way. If we don't act now, Earth is lost." As if on cue, the ground trembled again. Alien war machines were closing in, their weapons primed, their eyes locked on the artifact. It was clear they wouldn't wait much longer. "We need to activate it," Sarah insisted. "There's no other choice." Dr. Mitchell nodded, his eyes wide with fear, but also understanding. "All right, let's try. But we have to be careful. This power, it's not just technology. It's something far older. It's a key to something ancient, something that could change everything." Sarah stepped toward the pedestal that held the artifact, the air thick with tension. Her hand hovered just above it. The energy from the artifact pulsed with a strange warmth, as if it were alive, beckoning her to make the final move. "Focus on the frequency," Dr. Mitchell called out from behind her. "Align it with the signal we intercepted from the alien ships. We can amplify it, turn it against them." Sarah nodded and closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. The alien ships were close now, and she could hear the unmistakable roar of their engines echoing from above. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, with a deep breath, Sarah placed her hand on the artifact. The moment she touched it, a surge of energy shot through her like an electric current, and everything went white. The force of it nearly knocked her off her feet, but she held on, drawing in the power as best she could. The pyramid itself seemed to react, vibrating with the intensity of the artifact's energy. The symbols on the walls glowed brightly, and the chamber around them began to hum with an almost musical resonance. The entire structure seemed alive, as though it were waking from a long, ancient slumber. Sarah felt the power coursing through her, and for a moment, she saw flashes of images, visions of a past civilization, of beings who had once ruled the stars, of wars fought across the galaxy, and of an ancient race that had vanished long before humanity had even risen. She saw the aliens, these invaders, once part of that civilization, now seeking to reclaim their lost legacy, but it wasn't just history that flooded her mind. The vision revealed something else, the true purpose of the artifact. It was not just a weapon, it was a key to unlocking the potential of the galaxy, to harnessing energy beyond anything humanity could imagine. As Sarah fought to maintain control of the artifact's power, the alien forces closed in. The ground trembled beneath them, the air crackling with the intensity of the battle. Alien ships descended, their weapons aimed at the pyramid, ready to destroy it and everything within it. In that moment, Sarah realized what she had to do. She wasn't just fighting to protect Earth, she was fighting to change the course of history. The artifact wasn't just a weapon, it was the future. And humanity's future wasn't just to survive. It was to take its place among the stars, to reclaim its power and legacy. "Do it now," she shouted to Dr. Mitchell. The scientist nodded, rushing to his console. He pressed a series of buttons, and the pyramid's energy field flared to life. A massive wave of energy shot out from the artifact, enveloping the entire chamber in a blinding light. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, the alien ships above them began to falter. Their systems short-circuited, their weapons misfired, and their engines sputtered. One by one, the alien ships lost power, drifting helplessly in the sky. But Sarah wasn't done yet. With one final push, she focused every ounce of energy into the artifact, channeling the power through it with all her strength. The wave of energy surged outward, washing over the alien forces and disabling their weapons, their ships, their soldiers. The alien soldiers, disoriented and defeated, staggered back, unable to comprehend what was happening. Their forces were crumbling. Retreat! One of the alien commanders screamed, and within moments, the remaining invaders began to pull back, their ships fleeing the battlefield. Sarah collapsed to her knees, her body exhausted from the immense strain. The artifact's energy began to dissipate, its glow dimming as it returned to its dormant state. The pyramid fell silent once more. The battle won, but the cost had been high. The alien forces had been defeated, but the true significance of what had just happened weighed heavily on Sarah's mind. Humanity had survived, but what had they unleashed in the process? What was the full extent of the artifact's power? Dr. Mitchell walked over to Sarah, his expression filled with awe. "You did it. You saved us all." But Sarah wasn't so sure. As she looked out over the quiet battlefield, she realized that the fight had only just begun. The aliens may have retreated, but the secrets of the artifact, of humanity's true place in the galaxy, were only beginning to unfold. Myth of humanity had never been just a story. It was something more. And now the universe was watching.